you have been teaching for many decades and you met like a countless people, let's say. And today, or this very moment, so if you have to make a, what do you call the essence of your teaching, so what is that? What do you think, what is the most important that people, like you might really emphasize, or the people should really, that is the things that you really have to work on? So what you come to your conclusion, essence?
There are many different ways to enter into that room, different doors into the same room, so to speak. Uh-huh. So one would be that you're already okay. Right. That there's nothing fundamentally wrong with you. You're already whole. You're already beautiful. You're already generous. You're already patient. You're already compassionate. So there's no improving on you. You're already fundamentally a bodhisattva or a wise being, or for that matter, an awakened being. But it really requires living into, so that it's not merely kind of words. And that requires a practice. And that's what meditative awareness really is. It's cultivating a certain kind of practice that after a while doesn't look like practice anymore. I mean, I think you have, the phrase, the non-meditation, there's undistracted, unfabricated non-meditation. So then life itself is the meditation practice. Now, how you bring people to that point where they realize that, or can live their way into that, that's a kind of ongoing challenge. But if I were to put it in just one or two phrases, one would be, you're already good enough. Okay, trust that and pour energy into what's deepest and best and most beautiful, and then trust that things will emerge. The other is, don't take yourself too seriously. Right, yeah. Don't take anything that you think about yourself too seriously, because the narratives that we generate about ourselves come with either self-importance or self-denigration. It's either one extreme or another. Neither of them is true, because ultimately, whoever you think you are, that is a tiny little condensation or fraction of who you really are. Now, how you implement those, there's only one way to do it, and that is moment by moment outside of time. So the present moment is beautiful in that way, because when you drop into now, there's no time. Mm-hmm. Pure awareness, there's no time. So again, we're not trying to attain something in meditation. We're recognizing that it's already here. Right. It's all already here, but it requires the recognizing. That's what I would say. But of course, from a point of view of skillful means of upaya, we have to have 1,000 different ways and stories and forms to bring people into the room of their own heart. And that's really what MBSR and all the other mindfulness-based interventions that have developed, or mindfulness-based programs that are developing, are all about. And I love that there's this beautiful intersection with the Dharma, the sort of traditional Dharma streams, where we, in some sense, recognize that, as His Holiness often says, the Dharma is not some museum piece that we put away and then we sort of like, this is what the Dharma is. It's alive. It's the same as in the days of the Buddha, and it's also different because it has developed, and every one of the lineages has contributed enormously to the flourishing and the flowering of that kind of wisdom stream, or many, many different wisdom streams. And I feel like it's never, ever been more important than at this particular moment in history.
Right. Yeah.
And so just to say, because this is in the context of you're doing a global online, retreat over an extended period of time with your students, that this is part of the kind of lifeblood of this age in terms of Dharma, that we can all be together in the same room electronically, or we're all together on the same planet, but we can see each other, we can practice together, we can share with each other how it's going with our practice. That's never been possible before. That was not possible in the time of the Buddha. It wasn't possible even 40 years ago, that we can all be together because of the technology in a way that can actually, we can help each other to grow and to learn and to heal and to find our access to our true nature. And then that true nature we discover is compassion, because there's nothing else of any importance except to elevate others.
Right. Yeah. Elevate others. Yeah. For me, I feel like as you said, that I'm arrived. I'm okay. I'm fine.
For now.
Yeah, for now, exactly. And feel like now this is time to kind of serve, share whatever I learn. But until I think 3 decades in monastery and wandering, and it was so interesting that I was kind of lost, And for 2 decades in monastery and Sheda, I never thought that I'm a good human being. Can you imagine the title of Rinpoche? And then always you feel guilty of and shame of something. And then lots of people have expectation on you, and you have to hide a lot and pretend to be something, and wearing, I don't know, so many marks, the marks you're wearing.
Yes.
And then interestingly, I noticed that there's no compassion inside. There's no bodhicitta. And I was even teaching Buddhist philosophy in Shedra, because I was teaching while I was learning. I don't believe what I preach. I didn't believe in this whole. There is something called bodhisattva, bodhicitta, and then talking about emptiness. I thought that's a whole bullshit, and it's just not. It's just
it's wonderful and very liberating, Rinpoche, that you're saying this. I mean, because I think people really have to get past their projections, the projections that we kind of direct towards people who wear robes and who have titles such as Rinpoche and so forth. And, that you're saying this kind of thing is really illuminating and is a kind of bodhisattva action for others, at the same time that, I'm really moved and touched by your honesty, just because, when you can name things in that kind of a way, then all of a sudden you separate the essence of the Dharma from the forms of the Dharma, which sometimes can themselves be imprisoning and also misunderstood by other people.
Exactly.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Mingyur Rinpoche also has been very forthcoming and honest about his own anxiety and challenges, and having grown up in that kind of family and tradition and so forth. And the more, you speak like that, the more we recognize that, oh, you're a human being, just like we're human beings, because we can make Tibetans and Tibetan lamas and Rinpoches into something very special. And of course, you are very special, but probably not for the reasons that we understand. And we have full of projections and so forth that are harmful to us. They're also harmful to you. Okay. So the more you are candid and honest about those kinds of things with the people who are your students, the more actually they will benefit, but also in a certain way, the more you're embodying a kind of selflessness that has not just seen through, but in some sense, let go of, I won't say rejected, but let go of the sort of projections that inevitably are going to accrue to somebody with your karmic history.
Right, yeah.
And that's really beautiful, because you're really young, at least from my point of view. And so what is still to come is really unimaginable, but it has tremendous potential when you align with that kind of, I would say, radical honesty. Because, the Dharma is not immune to its own kind of tendency to get caught up in certain kinds of traditions and narratives that obscure the radical non-attachment to name and form.
Right, yeah.
That is essential for not getting caught in titles, or not getting caught in your students' projections about how perfect you are, because those projections, they're totally toxic. And it's one of, just speaking of MBSR teachers, it's one of the most important things for mindfulness teachers to learn, is to not believe how all the projections that people who are very grateful to them for having introduced them to mindfulness, and they've experienced wonderful benefits, then they project onto the teacher, you're some kind of God, you're some kind of transcendent being. Those are all like toxic arrows being shot into our bodies. And if we believe them, yes, you're right, I am an enlightened being. Yes, you're right, I never have any negative thoughts or impulses or anything. That's really extremely dangerous. And we've seen many Dharma teachers actually crash and burn because they start to believe the projections that their students and the public, puts on them. It's like a prison.
Exactly.
So I would just want to say, I really honor and bow to you, and I'm deeply moved by what you're saying here. And I'm sure that your students who are listening to this or going to listen to this are also going to let it register that we need to contribute to each other's freedom. And if I build a narrative of you that puts you in a box, no matter how wonderful and gilded the box is, I've put you in a box that's a form of violence and disregard. And, if you get that from tens of thousands of people, that's terrible, very toxic. And the same for me. People project onto me all the time. I don't want any of those projections. And I have to work very hard to not have people, for their own romantic needs, project onto me how transcendently liberated I am, because it's a problem. I just want to be a regular human being who's, as awake as possible in the moments that I have.
Exactly. I think in the end, we don't have to become what you call extraordinary. That's interesting. For me, last 2 decades, I think it was not a really good brainwash. Like you have to become someone,
Yeah. You have to become someone.
Exactly. So, that someone never.
Even a bodhisattva, that's that. If you have to become a bodhisattva, if you already are a bodhisattva, then that's a kind of non-dual wisdom. But if you have to become a bodhisattva, that's a big problem.
Exactly. So now, slowly I'm kind of, when I was wandering in Tibet for 3 years, 6 months after my Khenpo degree, and I met great masters. And I think then slowly I start to understand what is really Vajrayana method is. They call it like, I heard that, but I never really got that point for 2 decades in monastery, that in the Vajrayana, we use this fruit, the fruition as a path or as a base, which means you are the Dharmakaya. You are the awakened one, as you said. You are the Vajradhara. You are the Samandrabhadra. You are, and one of my root guru, the master from Tibet, the Rinpoche Rinpoche, his whole life he had been doing retreat. So he told me that never think that one day you will become a Buddha. No, one day you will become Bodhisattva. Right. You are. And just accept it. In the beginning, you can imagine, I just trained through this whole debate, the Buddhist Institute things, philosophy things. And in the beginning, I was a little doubt, like, come on. I'm not Buddha. I mean, you don't know me, like what is
Not
inside
me.
me.
Right.
Inside all of this, what I have done to other people, what I have done to myself. I mean, I'm not Buddha. But then he had been really telling me, like, just accept it. In the Vajrayana, you don't ask too many questions. Just accept it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And now I started getting that point. As you said, like, it's okay. You are okay. I think that's a simple, but this is what it really means. You're okay. And I really feel like that gives me some kind of like a deep breath,
Right.
like, oh, finally I'm arrived. Not like a something like all the time craving for something. Doesn't matter that is enlightenment or bodhisattva or even money. I think it really doesn't matter. All just named it.
Well, your hand is basically showing it all.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really wish this is what I come to a conclusion now from my practice, that really to teach other people that you're also okay.
Yeah.
You're also arrived, just. And since like last week I was in Denmark, I was teaching and I told them, and they said, really? That's it? We arrived? I'm okay? And I can see in their eyes, like they feel.
It's a radical message. And it's the exact right message for all sorts of reasons, one of which is that's always been the message. I mean, that's non-dual actuality. Exactly. And you're just pointing it out. But for this particular moment when, the vast majority of people are never going to enter into a monastery for years and years of a certain kind of training. Life is the monastery. The practice is life itself, and not just even when you're sitting on the cushion. Then every moment becomes, kind of pregnant with the possibility of being okay or good enough right in this moment. You don't have to be perfect, because as soon as you create perfect, it's a kind of another story. But if you're good enough for now, that lets you off the hook. What a relief. I can just be good enough for now. And then with awareness, you actually see that moment by moment, possibilities emerge when you don't block them from emerging because you're attached to an outcome. And this is something everybody can experience. But when you as the teacher, or anybody who's the teacher, actually helps people to feel seen and met and heard and recognized as okay for now, good enough for now. Yeah, you may have problems, but for now, which is, of course, a koan and a paradox. For now, you're good enough. And that's really a liberative message.
Exactly.
And it transcends time and space. And since we don't know how much time we have on the planet, that's exactly, I think, what we need at this moment is that kind of non-dual wisdom that allows everybody to be who they already are, right, and not have to, in the United States, we talk about self-improvement, and people think, oh, maybe mindfulness is just another self-improvement method. There's no improving on the self, because when you investigate it, there is no self to improve, but the actuality of your true nature, it's always been here. And we see it in babies, by the way. When babies are born, everybody knows babies are Buddhas. People often use that language. It looks like a little Buddha.
Exactly.
They're perfect as they are. And then, of course, as they grow, then we kind of forget, or we want to make them into the way we think they should be. Exactly. Yes, of course, they need to have a certain kind of training in how to be in wise relationship to reality and to other beings and their brothers and sisters and so forth. That's what we call socializing, but we don't want to socialize away their Buddha nature. Right. And, that's I would say a very beautiful Dharma practice, to be a parent. And millions of people are parenting that way now. Millions.
Beautiful. Yeah, for me, it was, I was kind of not very clear for last 3 decades. What should I pass down? Like, you are a Rinpoche, people are expecting, you are from Kagyu traditional, and people, you have a lineage. But I've been confused. What is my lineage? Like, am I passing down? Is it some Monro, like for preliminary practice, or is it 6 yoga of Naropa? Is it some kind of sadhana? Is it some kind of empowerment, initiation? I was confused. Like, then what will happen? Let's say if I pass hundreds of empowerment and like all the sadhana, and I myself, I'm not compassionate to myself or other people, and I'm not mindful of my thought, and I'm not arrived. And I've been thinking like, then I'm wasting their life in name of Dharma. But now I come to conclusion that I think this arriving and it's okay, and I'm good for now, as you said. So that kind of realization, I think it's a pragya for me, the pragya, the wisdom that's it. I'm arrived. I am. Not like I have to become someone. I am, and I'm arrived, and I'm satisfied.
And that may mean that you don't need to teach the forms in the traditional way.
Exactly.
If the forms are helpful and liberating and skillful, then yeah, you can teach them in either the traditional way or a non-traditional way. But really, it's your being that does all the teaching.
Exactly. Being, you mean being means what you're pointing to? Be who you are, or?
Yeah, your being, the way you are.
Oh, okay.
The way you carry yourself, the way you relate, exactly. The way, even when you're silent, everything about you is, in some sense, becomes infectious. We've just been through 2 years of a, pandemic with COVID. It's kind of, the virus is infectious, right. But the Dharma is also infectious in a non-toxic way, in only a good way. But when one is not attached to name or form, but you can skillfully use name or form when you need to, including all the sutras and everything else when you need to. But if you don't need to, the wisdom is not in the sutras. The wisdom, is like, it's like the notes of music. Yeah, it's great to be able to read the notes, but it's to hear the music that's even more important. So and that's what I think moves other people. So maybe what the Kagyu tradition or any tradition really needs from this generation. Yeah, of course, you've trained in all the forms, all the sutras, all the teachings, but ultimately it's your life that's the teaching, and not whether you teach the next generation the way you were taught, because maybe that's not what the next generation needs. They need embodiment in a certain way that's, again, goes beyond name and form, but doesn't reject name or form. So that, again, like as I said, I take some of it from my training and chanting for years of the Heart Sutra, the Prajna Paramita Sutra, that there's like, ultimately, there's no form and there's no emptiness, and then form is form and emptiness is emptiness. So none of that needs to be a problem, but we don't need to necessarily teach it in a way that only, say, 10% of people are going to be able to understand, right, when what we really want is to have 100% of people understand. Right. And that's where they'll understand by how you be as opposed to what you say.
Right, yeah.
That's my view of it, and that's my experience of it, actually. But that doesn't mean, as a lot of young mindfulness teachers want, it doesn't mean you could just make up whatever you think the Dharma is and then just do that. So the deep grounding in the traditions is absolutely essential. But then it's equally essential to transcend, transcend the nature of the forms if the forms somehow become a straitjacket in the face of the magnitude of the suffering of people who won't be helped by the forms so much as by the essence.
Right, yeah. Yeah, this is, I think, yeah, that the wisdom and then the compassion, to nice to, gentle or nice to people around you or, stranger, not that, oh, I am Rinpoche, kind of like really try to be humble enough. And as you said, like honest or authentic and really like I think this, as you said, like, I think what I come to conclusion, another is to live what you say. How do you say this?
Live what you say, live what you teach.
Yeah, live your what teach. I think that's I really try to do nowadays. In the last 3 decades, I was teaching and I was not living almost 99% of them. It's just, and I even don't believe what I teach, by the way.
Yeah, you said that. I heard you.
But now I when I teach, I feel proud of myself because I really live. I at least try to live.
Yeah.
It's just getting better and better, and I feel like, oh wow, you are doing good. If you're doing good, and they will also. And that's like a mother and children, a father and children.
Yeah, exactly.
The students,
Excuse me.
That's what I really saw. That.
And when you speak like that, as I said earlier, but I moved to say it again. When you speak like that, it's really liberating for other people. Because inevitably being a Rinpoche and being Tibetan and having grown up in the tradition that you've grown up in and tasted so much of the great Dharma teaching from other masters, there's this inevitable, fact that people are going to project all sorts of romantic fantasies onto you. And they're toxic for you. Or you just go along with them and think that it's not a problem, but what are you not teaching by getting caught in that? What are you not helping people to actually recognize? Because they want you to be some kind of figment or construct or fabrication of their own imagination.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's not liberation.
Exactly.
It's not. You're not liberated, and they're preventing. They're not liberated, and they're in some sense preventing you from being you, because there's a kind of agreement about those romantic projections that are. So if we're talking about compassion, that's the exact opposite of compassion. It can look like compassion, it can look like veneration and Rinpoche and everybody like a just tremendous honoring, but they're honoring a fiction. And as you said, it's like imprisoning for you. And it's also very dangerous for you to believe it. But as soon as you don't, you see, that's where mindfulness is so powerful, because your awareness of anything liberates you from whatever that thing is.
Right. Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're free, and if you're also, you have this incredible karma by virtue of the mystery of karma and birth and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Why not use it? That's what you're doing. That's the way I see what you're doing, is like the arc of a lifetime. It's all learning. It's like a big adventure. It's like incredible adventure. And as I like to say, the world needs us, every single person, to be who we are, not who other people want us to be, or even our teachers hope that we would be, or our family members and our parents hope that we would be. That's all a form of delusion.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's just so interesting, when you were a Rinpoche. I don't know how much you know about this whole tradition. It's for me, it was for a decade. I had a feeling of what do you call it? Shame that I'm not a high Rinpoche. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, right.
Reincarnation from the 14th century meditation master. It's almost 13 incarnation, but he was a very normal meditator. So he didn't have a monastery. He didn't have And when you do that big puja, the people, all the Rinpoches sit, and you are sitting somewhere in a really kind of
off to the side.
Yeah, all the other Rinpoches, and you are somewhere in the corner, and you feel like how other people are judging me. Like he's such a small Rinpoche, and now like that. This is so interesting for me now. When I started teaching, now it's getting better, and I feel like nobody is coming to teaching. Like nobody knows me. And then when I was looking at Jon Kabat-Zinn, wow, Deepak Chopra, start to feel a little jealousy, like they are the spiritual star. But why people are not coming to us or me? And I think that's the real dukkha. I'm just sharing with you. Now I don't have that. Now it's getting better. No matter only 2 people come, just give what you have.
Right.
We have.
Right.
But this is so interesting, this journey. Now people are looking at you, Chogyal Rinpoche, you are doing this and that. But still you feel you're small. But now as soon as you accept, I'm okay, I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you be not big, not small. Because big would be just as problematic as I feel small.
Exactly. It's
wonderful to hear you speak in this way because, first of all, nobody talks this way within the traditions. So, and this really feels to me like, this is kind of really telling the truth, your truth. And that's very important for you, of course, in terms of like not living a life that's not yours, which is very easy for all of us to wind up living somebody else's life or some fiction because we don't feel good enough, or why am I not famous enough, or what. And by the way, you never get famous enough. If you're attached to fame, there's always somebody who's more famous or who shot a rocket ship up higher than your rocket ship, or whatever it is. There's no end to that. But as soon as you don't need to be anything, then all of a sudden, you're in touch with a kind of root possibilities for human beings to heal, to be who they are, and not have it be good enough for now. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just good enough for now. And since you can't escape your karma as a Rinpoche, then maybe, your karma is to be a Rinpoche for the 21st century. And, your ancestors didn't know what a Rinpoche for the 21st century would be. But as we were saying, if the Dharma is alive and not a museum piece about just the past, then every generation has to teach the Dharma differently, even if you're, as we said, teaching out of the same text. You have to teach it based on your understanding. And if people judge your understanding or, don't like it or whatever, that's really their problem, as long as from your point of view, exactly, it's true to your experience. And my guess is that itself will be seen as like almost like a rebirth of Dharma.
Great.
I mean, I know that I've read about it, like in China, for instance, the Dharma has gone through ascendancy and then decline, and then ascendancy and then decline over periods of 500 years. So the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty, like incredible flourishing of Dharma, and then decline for hundreds of years, and then comes back. And I don't know how it's been in Tibet, because I think it's not that way in Tibet. But whatever it is, it's a natural progression of Dharma in the world. And now I would say it's in ascendancy again, but it's not going to be the forms of Tang Dynasty China or ancient Tibet. It has to be new. And so in some sense, I don't know if it's even appropriate to talk to you this way, but I would say, just because I'm older, that the challenge is to, find out what your karmic assignment is on the planet, because this is all like given to you, but it's given to you now. What is the most skillful, compassionate way to make use of it so that, one, you're not unhappy in some kind of chronic way that is self-generating.
Right, yeah.
And two, that you don't, lose the possibility of, as you were talking about, really just being yourself, being authentic, being good enough, and not having to compare yourself to anybody or anything. That's true liberation. And then see what happens. And then, I'll tell you what will happen is that people love that kind of authenticity. That's the only thing that's really infectious. That because the Dharma has to be embodied. Otherwise, it's just philosophy or psychology. It needs to be embodied, and it's always embodied differently, but it has to be embodied authentically. And so every great Dharma teacher, no matter what tradition, is going to look different, and they're going to do it differently. And a lot of them are going to break all the rules because they're not attached to the rules. That doesn't mean that you act in a way that is harmful.
Of course.
But you break all of the kind of constraining rules that the Dharma has to look one way because of the traditions and the kind of attachment to a kind of, narrative about the traditions that may be too small for what the Dharma is called to do in the 21st and 22nd centuries.
Right, yeah.
So, I feel like incredibly privileged to be having this conversation with you. I mean, I've never had a conversation like this with any other teacher except my closest Dharma brother, Larry Rosenberg, who we've been talking like this together for more than 50 years. But I just feel incredibly humbled and privileged to have been invited by you to have a conversation like this. And the fact that you're actually recording it, and then you'll take elements of it, whatever you choose to do, and offer it to your students. We've, in a certain way, it looks like maybe we haven't really touched on the subject of compassion. I would say that exactly what we're touching on is true compassion. And even more importantly, there's no separation between emptiness, compassion, and wisdom.
Right, yeah.
And I call that mindfulness. That's my shorthand, is mindfulness or heartfulness is the shorthand for all of it. It's not like it's just one thing. It's in some sense, the container for the beauty and all of the complexity and simplicity of what the Buddha originally taught.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's thank you for your time, and let's conclude today's talk. It's beautiful. So in the conclusion, do you have any question for me? Like I don't know what. I mean, you can ask me anything about my life, or I don't know, whatever you're curious about.
Yeah. Actually, no, I've been very bad my whole life at asking questions of meditation teachers.
Right, yeah.
I listen as deeply as I can.
Right, yeah.
And I've very, very touched by everything you've said. And I believe I've heard pretty much everything you've said today. And it's moved me deeply in ways I probably will have resonate in me for a very, very long time. Because as I said, this doesn't happen every day to me to have a conversation like this with anybody. But I don't have any questions for you in that sense of like wanting to know something special about your view of Dharma. I feel like what you've given me, without my asking any questions, is a true sense of what you love and who you are, and your radical honesty about your own trajectory and how committed you are to being of use for your Sangha, for your community. And while it might look on the surface as if we haven't talked that much about compassion, I would say that the entire conversation has in some sense been the embodiment of two people listening deeply to each other and feeling what can't be put into words underneath it all, that is in some sense both the mystery and the beauty of the love affair that we were talking about, of like why you do what you do. It's got to be out of love, much more than out of the tradition, and you happen to have this karmic trajectory. I mean, you could reject it, but if you're not rejecting it, it's got to be out of deep compassion and love and caring. And the same for me, that I mean, I do this out of a kind of deep caring that, you know, the wakefulness is something that is part of our nature, and we have to cultivate all of the conditions that are required for us to not only have moments of awakening, but to sustain embodied wakefulness, you know, across our lifespans.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
So, thank you. I mean, I'm going to, in some sense, this the vibrations of our conversation are going to linger with me for a long time. And I feel like it's funny to say this being recorded, and you may not want to, you know, put this part out, but I don't care if you do. That since we first met and you came to the retreat that Will and I led, you know, it was a kind of really interesting question to me. Why would a Rinpoche, an incarnate Lama, come to a mindfulness retreat at Omega, you know, take a lot of time and energy to do something like that? And now I know. And I know in a way that it generates more love and more mystery and more appreciation for the future than I would have imagined possible. So I do a lot of different kinds of things on Zoom, but this is unique in my experience. And I hope that people who listen into aspects of this conversation are really touched, not by so much you and me and what we're, you know, sort of chit-chatting about, but if people actually hear that what I think we're really both giving them permission to do is trust their true nature and live it as if there was no tomorrow, as if the world absolutely depended on it right in this timeless moment we call now, that would be like just, I think, an enormous gift to the world and certainly to your community. So it will be interesting to hear years down the road what the impact of this conversation has been. And maybe 5 or 10 years from now, we can have another one and just catch up again. But I hope our paths cross long before that, just in whatever ways they do.